nationalities, and indeed we have a very, very wide range of nationalities who have applied and have been successful. So although the term Windrush is generally taken to relate to one specific or a number of specific communities in the UK, this is open to a much broader range of people and communities than that. And then the third thing is just to reiterate the point that was made about how we work within the Home Office. Our team is very separate from the rest of Home Office operations, and there are rules in place about us sharing information with the rest of the Home Office, and particularly with immigration enforcement, and we basically can't do that. We operate on a different computer system. We don't share information. No one anywhere else in the Home Office will know that a person has applied for the scheme other than the people working on the scheme, who as I say, are part of a very separate team. So, very clear that people shouldn't be put off from making an application for compensation, or indeed to the Immigration Task Force, which we'll come on to in a minute, by concerns about Home Office action, because it's not something that can result from that. Okay, so if we just move on to the first slide, we'll talk a bit about what became called the Windrush scandal. So, as I say, many of you will be aware of it, and many of you may have experienced it yourself. So I wouldn't choose to go into too much detail, tell people things about their own experiences. But broadly, the Windrush scandal was a result of a deep thoughtlessness and on behalf of the department I work for, that we continue to apologise for. We failed people who were lawfully in the UK, and we put them in a position where either they had status and they weren't able to prove it, and we weren't able to help them do that, or we introduced new rules that meant that the documents that they were using became more difficult or not possible to use. And as a result of that, those people suffered a wide range of impacts, from not being able to work to being removed or deported from the UK, to not being able to access housing, and a very wide range of impacts on their life. Now, as a result of that, the government's initial response, so if we could just move to slide 4, if that's all right, a task force was established, and we'll talk a bit about that in a moment, which was to ensure that people could obtain documents to evidence their status in the UK, and importantly, could obtain those documents for free. One of the significant issues within the Windrush scandal was that people in the UK who were rightfully here were, to an extent, prevented by the price of documents from being able to obtain the correct document to prove that they were lawfully and rightfully here. We then moved from that task force into the Windrush scheme, which is a scheme enshrined in law, which allows for people who came to the UK before the end of 1988 and are now settled to apply for documentation again for free. We have a helpline which is was set up to provide advice and guidance to those applicants, and we have an ongoing program of outreach, of which actually this conversation is part, and we've held much more than 80 surgeries across the UK. And then we have what's called a vulnerable persons team, which is a team that doesn't just deal with people's immigration or compensation applications. It can support people from this group who are having difficulty accessing housing benefits. Many of the people who've been looked after by the vulnerable persons team have been homeless or have had unstable housing, and we can help people where that has been as a result of them not being able to prove their status. We have and can help and support them to access other services and to get themselves back on their feet. So we'll just move on to the next slide. So the next slide talks specifically about the Windrush scheme, as we call it, formerly the Windrush Task Force. This is not the compensation scheme. This is the scheme where people who arrived in the UK before the end of 1988 and are settled, or Commonwealth citizens who were settled in the UK before 1973 and their children, can apply for documentation confirming their status. So this basically allows people to come forward where they are lawfully in the UK and they arrived and form part of one of those two groups. We look at their case, we support them and help them to ensure that evidence is available to support their case, and they don't have to pay a fee, and we grant them a document that recognises that status so that they won't have difficulty in accessing services or working in the UK. It's just also to say, to qualify under the scheme, you don't have to remain continuously resident in the UK. So if you were in the UK and settled before 1973, you are also eligible in some circumstances to make an application for citizenship. You will still need to show various other elements to prove that you still have ties to the UK and other things like that. But you can come and you can get citizenship, and you would no longer need to take a life in the UK test or the English language qualification. We can just move on to the next slide. So then there's a separate scheme, which is the compensation scheme, and it's important to note that you don't have to have been, that the applications are independent. So you make a separate application to the compensation scheme from the one that you can make to the task force. Now, the compensation scheme broadly deals with the same groups of people, so Commonwealth citizens who arrived in the UK before 1973 and are here lawfully, Commonwealth citizens currently overseas but who were settled in the UK before 1973, and then people of any nationality who arrived in the UK before 1988. So those are the people who can claim on their own behalf, what we call primary claimants. Then there are two other groups, or three other groups who can apply. The first are close family members of eligible applicants. So to give an example of that, we have cases where, for example, someone's father or mother was unable to work as a result of the Windrush scandal, and they themselves then chose not to pursue their education because they needed to go to work themselves to support their family. And under those circumstances, we have been able to pay out compensation on the basis that the impact of the family member of the child in that circumstance, or the person who was a child at the time, was significant and was as a result of the scandal. You can also make a claim if the person who was affected by the scandal has sadly died since then, and so if you are a relative of someone who's passed away, but who would have been eligible, who did suffer as part of the scandal, you can make an application. And there are also certain children and grandchildren of Commonwealth citizens who can also make an application in their own right. But just to give a general idea on this page, I think, of how people, or the types of experiences that would qualify people for the scheme. The way we describe it is that you have to have suffered a detriment as a result of not being able to prove a status that you lawfully had. So, for example, someone who was a Commonwealth citizen who arrived before 1973 and was settled in the UK in 1973 would always have had indefinite leave to remain, would always have been able to stay in the UK and had and would not have been there would have been no barrier to their remaining in the UK. But at that stage, that person may not have had a document. So someone in those circumstances may, at certain stages in their life, have been told by an employer that they couldn't work because they didn't have a document to prove that they could work. They may have approached the Home Office for that document, and the Home Office may have said that they didn't have any record of that person because of how long ago it was that they came to the UK. They may have had trouble accessing healthcare as a result of not having that document despite being lawfully in the UK, and those are the kinds of things that you can be compensated for. So people who've had that kind of experience where they lived in the United Kingdom for a very long time, this was their home and they were lawfully here, but they didn't have a document to prove that, and as a result of that they weren't able to work or claim benefits or gain housing or go to school or university or those kind of things. So just to bring it alive, that's an example of the kind of people who would be eligible for the scheme. So can we just move to the next page, please? So what happens with my case? The first thing we would say is we would encourage people, if they think that they may qualify to contact our helpline, and we give the details at the end of this. And via the helpline, if people want, they can be put in contact with what we call a claims assistance provider. So that is a organisation that works for us and can support people in formulating their claims. So we would encourage people to contact us before they make an application, before they fill in a form, and also to avail themselves of the claims assistance provider if they think that would be helpful. Then the first stage of the scheme is what we call registration and identification. So that's where someone has to confirm their ID in the way that you would normally have to access any service. We obviously, given the circumstances, we can help people to do that. So if people don't have ID, we can help by seeking, information from Home Office databases or from other government databases to help us prove that someone is prove someone's identity. We then register their case. Then the first stage is the eligibility determination, and that is where we make sure that someone is within one of those groups of people, so Commonwealth citizens who arrived in the UK before 1973, or someone who's arrived before 1988. So we make sure that someone has the immigration status that means that they're part of a group that can avail themselves of the scheme. And then you're allocated to a caseworker. Your case is considered, and during that period, your caseworker will talk to you and will support you in gathering evidence. So we will talk to other government departments to look at your tax records, for example, so that we can evidence when you were working. We'll contact previous employers if you want us to. We can contact your medical, your NHS doctor, and we have a facility for us to pay for a report from them if we need to. And at that point in the process, or indeed before, we can issue what we call a preliminary payment. So where we can see that someone early in the process has evidence that they have suffered some form of detriment, but we think that we need to do more work, which we often do to ensure that we've covered every element of their claim, then we can make that preliminary payment. At that stage, that's a £10,000 payment. So that's effectively an advance or a down payment on the compensation. We are saying we can see that someone has suffered. We can see there's enough evidence there to show that something's happened. We need some more time to work through their case to make sure that we pay them the full compensation they're entitled to. But in the meantime, we'll offer them a preliminary payment. So that can happen, although that's aligned on the presentation to the case consideration stage. It can happen earlier than that. It can happen pretty much straight after the eligibility determination, and it can happen later than that as well. It just depends on how long it takes for the evidence to be gathered by our caseworker working alongside the applicant. And I would just say, and again, this is something you do see some people saying things about the scheme, saying that this is not the case about the scheme. The caseworker, our objective in the scheme is to pay people as much compensation as we can within the terms of the rules of the scheme. So we will work with an applicant, and we will pursue multiple avenues of multiple avenues to seek evidence that we can use to support the claim and to evidence the claim. So it's not really a traditional process where you make an application with some documents, we look at them, and then we give you a decision. We'll work through the process of the application to generate the right documents. And that is why it can, unfortunately, in some cases, take some time to get from application to decision, but that's also why we can offer a preliminary payment during that process. And then just to say, at the point that someone registers or makes an application, they are offered, they're asked how they would like to be contacted, and if they want, for example, a monthly phone call, we can do that to update them. If they prefer to be contacted by email, we'll do that as well. Then after a period, once we've concluded our investigations, or once we've concluded investigations, the wrong word, once we've concluded our consideration, an offer's formulated and sent, you can at that stage choose to either accept the offer or reject it. If you reject the offer, there are then two stages of review. One is a review by another caseworker who works in the scheme but who is part of a separate team. And if you're still unhappy after that with the outcome, we then have a independent body, the adjudicator's office, who conduct what we call a tier 2 review. So there are two levels that you can use to challenge your decision if you don't think that the compensation that you're being offered is appropriate. Okay, should we move to the next slide, please? So this just covers the way the compensation scheme works. So there are a range of different things that people can be compensated for. So the majority of those, all but one of those, are heads of claim, as we call them, that address a specific issue. So, and are designed to compensate for a specific amount of money lost. So the most obvious one that we would talk about is access to employment. So, and this is something that we see in lots of our cases. So someone is told by their employer that they're no longer able to work because they can't prove their status, even though they're lawfully in the UK. What we would then do is look at, their previous earnings, their previous wages from that job, how long it is they were out of work, and we would seek to compensate them for the period that they were out of work to the amount that they lost as a result of that. Similarly, we work with DWP to ensure that if people have lost benefits or allowances, or tax allowances, that those are reinstated for the period for which they were unable to work as a result of issues that were beyond their control. And then there are a range of other categories like that where you'll be directly compensated for your loss of access to something: housing, education, health. Then I guess there's two other things worth touching on. There's kind of the three at the bottom around detention, deportation, and removal. So people will get significant compensation awards if they've been unlawfully detained by the Home Office, if they've been the subject of a deportation, even though they were rightfully in the UK. And where that can be evidenced, and it can be normally quite easily from our systems, they will receive a significant compensation payment on that. And then the last category, which is the category that results in the most payments, so the category that more claimants than are able to qualify under than any others, is the impact on life category. So that allows us to take a really broad range of impacts to an individual into account and award them a compensation payment on the basis of that. So that is basically designed to compensate as best we can, although in some cases, no financial compensation will adequately right the wrong, but compensate as best we can for the overall impact on someone's life, and particularly the impact that these issues can have had on them psychologically, but just in general on their life as a whole. Applicants can claim under more than one category. So when you fill in your form, you can indicate that you want to claim under all or only one of these categories. But also importantly, if while we're looking at your case, we think that you qualify for something that you haven't claimed for, we will still offer you a payment in that category. So again, the process is designed to be collaborative and for us to identify proactively and offer compensation where we can. Can you just move down to the next slide, if that's okay? So it's worth saying that, and this you will have seen, I'm sure that everyone on the line will have seen elements about this on the press or social media, that have definitely been some issues with the scheme, some problems with the operation of the scheme to now. And I think they can broadly fall into three categories. The first is that this scheme, as it was originally designed, the payments were, to be very frank, were not high enough at the end of the scheme. So if you looked at and read someone's story, what they were telling you about their experiences, and then looked at the amount that they were being compensated, it was not an adequate amount. So we have significantly changed that by increasing the levels of the impact on life award that I just mentioned. Now, it's worth saying that everyone who's eligible for everyone who is entitled to compensation gets an impact on life award. So this benefits everyone who receives compensation under the scheme. And what we've done is moved from a scale where the minimum award was £250 and the maximum was £10,000 to one where the minimum is £10,000 and the maximum is £100,000. And again, what that means is we hope that will at least show to an extent that those payments at the end of the scheme are much more appropriate to the stories that we're hearing. The other was the introduction of the preliminary payment, which I've just mentioned, which again allows us in some cases where we can see that someone has evidence that they have suffered a detriment, but where we think think more work is needed on their case to finalise their offer, that we can make that £10,000 payment early in the process, so that people are compensated to an extent while we're finalising their case. And that is designed to deal with, I guess, what was the second issue of the scheme and remains, is just the amount of time it takes in some cases to work through claims. And I should say that alongside that, we're also committed to speeding the scheme up overall. If we could just move on to the second slide. So I won't go into this in too much detail because it's slightly complicated. And if you're not someone who has an application in the scheme, it probably isn't a level of detail you need to get into. But there were quite a few problems with the way that we considered how to compensate someone for not being able to work. Or for loss of access to employment. And really the problem was that it was too complex a rule, that it required, for example, people to show that they'd made efforts to resolve their status in an environment where we accept now that many of them wouldn't have been able to do that, or would have been rightfully concerned about coming forward to the authorities. And it introduced various caps and other things that meant that people didn't end up getting compensated for the amount of time they were out of work. So we just really basically removed all of them, so that someone does get a payment that covers the total amount of time that they were out of work as a result of not being able to prove their status, and that they are compensated at a level that is commensurate with the amount that they were being paid at the time that they lost their job. Okay, we just move on to the next slide. I won't go into too much detail on this. The only thing to point out, because it was something, again, that was spoken about a lot, is that there used to be certain elements of the scheme that applied the highest standard of proof. So the beyond that people had to prove things beyond reasonable doubt, which is what you would hear in court often. That's obviously a pretty high bar. We have removed that from the scheme now, so no one has to meet that level of proof. What we call now is what we use now is what we say, more likely than not, that the losses and impacts being claimed for were incurred. So that again means that where people have less evidence than others, they may still be able to make out a claim under the scheme, because we recognise that many of the issues people will have suffered will be historic. They won't have kept very good records, understandably, from those periods. That indeed, if you didn't have a status document, and that was one of the issues that you had, we can't expect you to produce one now to evidence your case. So we hope that by changing that standard of proof, it means that we can much more easily offer people compensation. So let's just carry on down to the next slide, if that's okay. I'm not going to get into too much detail. Just the third-party evidence bit is important to touch on, which is that we will pay where we think, a good example of this is some GPs will ask for payment for people's medical records, or to share people's medical records, and we are willing and can be paid for that. And again, that goes to the way we want to operate the scheme, which is to support people in gathering the evidence they need so that we can ensure they get the maximum compensation they're entitled to. If you just move down to the next slide, if that's okay. Right. So this shows the total amount paid to November. This is fairly out of date. So the total amount paid to November was £2.4 million. We're now, I think, up close to £3 million, and we announced, I think, or we put some information out into public domain last week to show that since we made the changes on the 15th of December, we've offered a further £4.5 million, and we expect that to increase significantly, and payments to increase significantly over the course of the next few weeks and months as we bring in those changes. A typical payment can range now from £20,000 to £70,000, and so payments to individuals are very significant, and we have numbers of payments over the £100,000 mark. So again, we would expect that we will continue to increase payments as we go. So then if we just move to the next slide, which is probably the most important one for people to take note of. So we do have a helpline that's staffed Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and an email address. That helpline can support you in applications to both schemes. So it can support you in an application to the compensation scheme and also to the status document scheme. I would really encourage anyone who has any queries or think that they might be entitled to contact that team as their first port of call. And as I say, they can also provide you with access to the vulnerable persons team. So that is access to someone who can support people to get themselves into housing or back onto benefits if that was what they needed, and kind of back into state support. And then they can also refer you to the claimant assistance provider, who at the moment for another 3 weeks are the Citizens Advice Bureau, but that is shortly going to turn into a company called We Are Digital, who some of you may have heard of. They work a lot with housing associations to support digital inclusivity, so to help people effectively who aren't traditionally people who use the internet, and that hasn't allowed them to kind of access information and services they need. They support those types of people in training them to train them to access those services. So they are going to be working for us, but they importantly work through a network. So while they are the main company involved, they subcontract to local immigration charities, local charities and local advice services. So if you ask for claimant assistance, it won't be the company called We Are Digital. It will be a local service that may already serve your community that will have been trained to carry out this work. So I'd encourage you to use them. Now, the next slide is about the Windrush Community Fund, but I think, Paul, you wanted to bring in another speaker at this stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom, for that detailed information. And I'm sure participants on this forum will have had their questions written down, and we'll go through the questions. I would like to bring in someone, because I remembered, fortunately, I sit on the Churches Together in England on behalf of the Council of African and Caribbean Churches, United Kingdom. And I also sit on the Racial Justice Working Group of the Churches Together in England. You quite right that the first time I mentioned at the CTE meeting, the national meeting, and someone asked, "Oh, do you mean Nigerians suffered under the Windrush scandal?" And I said, yes. And so a lot of people do not know. But from the work that I did on behalf of the Windrush team as an ambassador, I came across a lot of people. A lot of people came across to me and asked questions, and I signposted them to. But there's a significant person who actually suffered under the Windrush scandal, and I will want him. He's willing. There's one that didn't want to say anything because the individual is waiting for his British passport. So feels that okay, she will not want to say anything for now. But here is a man who suffered under the Windrush scandal and had an interaction with the Windrush help team. And I will call him now to please share his experience. His name is Mr. Abayomi Adeleke. He's a Nigerian. And I'll ask him to unmute now to tell us his experience within the next 10 minutes. Over to you. Please unmute Mr. Adeleke and tell us your story. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening to you, Mr. Adeleke.
I would like to introduce myself. My name is Abayomi Adeleke. I'm a Nigerian, and I came to England and in the year 1985, June precisely. When I got to England, I studied at the London School of Economics at Barbican City, and whenever my visa is due, I used to go to the Home Office to renew my visa. I did that for a while until 1992 when I was unable to renew my student visa again. Then I applied for to extend my visa on long residence overstay. I couldn't make it that time. As a result of that, I lost my apartment because I was working at London Borough of Lusham as a part-time cleaner. So I got a house at a one-bedroom flat at 118 Fosby Road, Brooklyn, Southeast 42SH. Then I later submitted an application. 2000, that was 1995. The application was also reviewed. Then I decided to go on with my life. But I believe there is nothing I can do if I don't get my status correctly. So 2010, I put in a fresh application. This application was also reviewed. Okay? I don't know what to do again. Then somebody advised me that I should put in another fresh application. That was in 2014. 2014 March, I put in another fresh application to the Home Office. Then I was working at Three Bridges construction sites. June 2014, the immigration came there and they sacked me from that job. Then, August 2014, I went to the Home Office Croydon reporting center, where we used to report every month. I was detained and sent to Dover. When I got to Dover, I spent 1 month at Dover before I was about to be deported to Nigeria via Santet Airport. But on our way to the Santet Airport, the immigration sitting beside me was telling me, Mr. Adeleke, how long have you been in this country? And I told him I was surprised. I have been in this country since 1985, and I have my records. But anytime I go to the Home Office will tell me they don't see any record. But I don't know what to do. But when we got to the Stanford Airport, there is a call there is a call, telephone call from the court that my deportation has been suspended. It has been cancelled. So they took me back to the Brook House. But the painful part of it was that all my phone, my personal belongings has been sent to Lagos. You know, when I was released, I have to start all over again. I spent almost 40 days in detention before I was released. That was 2014. Then 2015, the same place at the Croydon House, I was detained and sent to Dorset, the van. I was in this van. I sent the application to the court. I told them I've been in the country since 1985, and I have a wife, a stepdaughter, and so on. And I believe this is my country. I've been in this country for 32 years. How will I go to start when I get to Lagos? Nigeria, you are talking about, I've never been there for 32 years. Okay. My deportation also was cancelled. But I believe I thought that is all over. But 2016 again, I was at the Solihull Reporting Center. That night, I could never forget it. I was anchored into the waiting van that take me to Martin Hall. That night, I was anchored like a common criminal. Well, When I got to Motin Hall, I spent almost 1 month at Motin Hall before I was posted to Bristol Removal Center, before I later landed at Brookhouse again. Okay, when I got to Brookhouse, we used to have a video court, where you can see the judge and you can tell them how your situation is. And then the judge there that night gave me bail. The judge set me free, and that night I left Brookhouse after more than 2 months, because I was detained February and I was released on the 10th of April. So after that time, I don't know what to do again. I went to see my partner at Birmingham. My partner got indefinite leave to remain. Then they want to rehouse us. He said I cannot go with them because I am a legal immigrant. And that word, legal immigrant, how would I call this man? It's a caseworker where we are getting the house. And he told me, how long have you been in this country? I told him I've been in the country in 1985. Oh, you can't be like this. Then he gave me a note to go and see the MP. When I got to the MP checked my documents, and she told me, have you been to prison? I told him I've never been to police station since 1985 in this country. Then he said he's going to do DBS. If my DBS is okay, she will call me and she will write the appropriate authority. Well, when my DBS came out, she called me on the phone to come and submit my paper. And when he wrote a letter to the Home Office, we were expecting the reply for 28 days, according to her. We couldn't get the replies, but in May 2018, I received a call from the Home Office. The Home Office told me on the phone, Mr. Adeleke, I'm going to ask you 40 questions. If you are able to get 35, you will be among the Windrush. Meanwhile, I have never heard of Windrush since I've been in the country. So then we started. Out of the 35 questions, I got all the 35. Then he said, okay, I am satisfied. Then, few weeks later, I received a call from the Home Office as well that I should come for my biometric on the 6th of June, 2018. Meanwhile, on the 30th of May, I was supposed to be in the court with the Home Office. I went there, the Home Office didn't come, but I told the judge I don't want to disrespect the court. That is why I came, that the Home Office has already called me to come for my biometric on the so date. I went there on the 6th of June, and they checked all my documents, and they told me later, when I left there, that in another 5 days, I will receive my biometric card. After that was Wednesday on the 6th. On Friday on the 8th, I received my settlement card in this country. Let me look at on the 19th of April, 2019, the Home Office sent email to me that I should apply for compensations. When I got this email, I didn't believe it. I thought maybe the Home Office can't be serious about these compensations, until I have the opportunity to speak to the ambassador, Windrush ambassador, Mr. Paul, who gave me assurance, and and encouraged me that, Mr. Leke, you will still get this compensation. This compensation is going on. Okay. Then August last year, August 2020 last year, on the 24th August, I received a call from the Home Office that they want to know my preferred contact. And I told them I want it by post. So put it in written so that when I receive it, I will read over it and see what I can do about it. So we have been on it. And since then, I have been receiving. My last letter I received from them was the 25th of August, and 25th of this month, January. They said all my claim has been considered and has been passed to the manager for final review. So I will use this opportunity to thank the Home Office for their kind gesture. And also the Windrush ambassador, who gave me the assurance that this thing is not a joke, it's going to be a reality. So those are what I experienced so far with the Home Office. Just to let you know that Nigeria is also involved in this Windrush scandal. So I thank you everyone for listening. And that is all for now.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Abayomi Adeleke, for that detailed information. I don't know whether Tom will, do you have anything to say on that? Paraventure or anyone may want to ask Mr. Adeleke any question. Or Tom, do you want to say anything at all? Tom? Tom, you can unmute, please. Is Tom able to? Oh, sorry. Is Tom able to? Oh, sorry. Let me get Tom to unmute. Sorry about that. Trying to find where Tom. Oh, yeah. Okay. You can please unmute now, Tom.
Hold on. Am I on now?
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. I didn't want to say a huge amount, other than to say I'm really sorry to Mr. Adeleke that he had to have that experience in the UK. But I hope that some, at least, of what has been done since we set up the task force has served to appropriately address those issues for him, and that when we do, it sounds like he'll get his offer fairly soon, and hopefully that will be one that he will consider covers the issues. But as I said, just to say I'm really sorry, and I'm really sorry that happened. I don't know whether you're taking any more questions now, or you want me to do the next bit of the presentation, Paul.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think I'll advise that you take the next presentation so that we can run through. Okay. Thank you.
So let me.
Over to you, Tom.
Yeah. I think this is just to talk briefly about the community fund. So alongside the ambassador program, which members of it here today, we have opened what we call the Windrush Community Fund. That's a fund of £500,000, which will support charities, community and grassroots organisations to run outreach and promotional activity to raise awareness of the schemes. Now, just to touch on this, and this is partly goes back to the point that we've returned to on several occasions tonight, which is that there are lots of people who may be eligible for the scheme who are either nervous or don't think that it applies to them. And in both cases, that's very understandable. So we want to support applicants, to support groups who can work within the communities where we think there may be people who are eligible, and help them to understand that the scheme is not anything to be afraid of and that it is something that is for them. So organisations can make applications. The awards that they will get will range from a minimum of £2,500 to a maximum of £25,000. It says there that the fund is in 2 phases, so the closing date for phase 1 applications is the 12th of February. So it's probable that if you're seeing this for the first time and you think you might be able to apply for it, that's leaving you quite a short period of time to do it. But if not, phase 2 will be open for applications on the 1st of April 2021 and close on the 30th of June. And it's important to say that fund is administered at least in part by an organisation called Voice for Change, who are again independent of the Home Office. So they will support people and help us in identifying people who should be eligible for that fund. And I would encourage anyone who's part of one of those groups to consider very carefully joining us and applying for the community fund. And I think that's the last slide. So thanks very much. I think there's time for some questions now, and I'll hand them back.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Now, thank you very much, Tom. From the testimony of Mr. Abayomi Adeleke, I'm sure a lot of people will remember someone who has been there, or the parents who has been there. They are no more, they are deceased, or they've been deported somewhere along the line, who could apply for compensation. It shows it's a reality. One thing is that at each stage, Mr. Abayomi Adeleke briefs me. In fact, the last letter from the Home Office is sent a copy to me by email, and just to assure everyone that the Home Office is very serious about it. I'll call it the new face of the Home Office, and they're friendly and they're willing. They're the ones who called Mr. Adeleke to apply. And so the information we have now, you could know someone, because there are community leaders online, there are faith leaders online, business and opinion leaders online who are connected variously. I mean, if numerically we think about the strength of the great people that are online, we've contacted more than 10,000 people, on this line now, because they could replicate and disseminate the information further and wider. And before I ask people to ask questions, the Windrush Community Fund, there are so many organizations, charities, places of worship, religion, charities, ministries that are online. And I want to encourage you to, you can organize yourself, you can could join together or apply for the Windrush Community Fund, so that you'll be able to disseminate and promote this compensation scheme throughout the West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and even if you work with the India, Bangladesh, and Pakistani community, you could afford yourself the opportunity. Now, thank you, everyone. We're still within the time. Well, I can assure you that we're going to finish as advertised at 8:30. Thank you, everyone. We have only 30 minutes more on this program, and I would like to call on those that have indicated that they have questions. Actually, I should ask, but because of time, I should ask, because some people sent me some questions. Our people, I'm sure some are having the confidence now, and I'm sure they can come up now and then approach the Home Office. Let me ask this question, and then I'll call on Pastor Kemia Kombi and another person that wants to ask a question. Can you apply for the scheme if you have been deported or living overseas? Tom, please.
So yes, you can. We accept applications from people who are overseas. There are numbers of people who suffered these kind of issues and have then either been deported from the UK or have chosen to leave the UK. And yes, you are entitled to apply from overseas under both the immigration and the compensation scheme.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly chip in. Let me quickly ask this. I know you. Based on the conversations I've had, many people are reluctant to come forward because they still fear that the details may be passed on to immigration enforcement. Can you reassure people? Because are their informations protected? Please, over to you, Tom.
So I absolutely can, and you don't really need to also hear it from me. Government ministers have made this undertaking in Parliament and in other places, and obviously they wouldn't do that unless they were absolutely sure that was the case. But also on a practical level, I think I touched on this earlier. So the team that deals with compensation applications is not based alongside any other teams in the Home Office. It's based separately in an office near where I am here. I'm in Sheffield, but nearby in Leeds. They work from a computer system that only they have access to, that it's not one that other parts of the Home Office have access to or can search. And alongside that, there are some very strict rules about us sharing any information that we gather with people elsewhere in the Home Office, and broadly we can't. And where we do have to make entries where we are giving people immigration documents, so the immigration scheme, where we do have to work on Home Office computer systems, there's a special, what we call a firewall, which prevents those applications from being viewed by anyone outside of our team. So we do take that very, very seriously, and there is no question that someone who applies is eligible for the scheme would have their information passed to other parts of the Home Office. And I should also add, while we're talking about that, people have also expressed concern to me in the past because we do share information with HMRC, so with Revenue and Customs, and also with Department for Work and Pensions. Again, the information we share with them, they can't use for enforcement. So where people have, for example, been working cash in hand at times in their lives, and we know that we wouldn't share that information with HMRC. The way that we work with those other government departments is we say, can you tell us what you know about this person, rather than here are some things that we know about that person. So none of that information is shared, and I think it's important to reassure people of that.
Thank you very, very much, Tom. I'll call on Pastor Kemi Akubi to ask her question. Can you please unmute Pastor Kemi Akubi? That's all right. Sorry about that. I'm trying to see. Wow. Please bear with me. Don't worry, we're still within time. Let me go ahead. Okay. All right. Can you unmute, please? Can Pastor Kemi unmute, please?
Thank you very much. Okay. And I want to say thank you to thank you, Tom, and thank you to Reverend Paul Shayler for putting this program together. I think you've answered a part of my question. The other part of my question is, for those who have been removed, what would be their compensation? Will they still be possibly allowed back in to the country since they have been removed, and they've gone to Africa? And could they have other people make their application on their behalf? For instance, for someone who is mentally challenged?
So, in answer to your first question, yes. If people were wrongly removed and deported, they can return to the UK, and the scheme will support them in doing that, both financially and through making sure that they have the appropriate status. It's difficult to talk because I don't know about the specific individual that you're talking about, but in those types of circumstances that can happen. And then I think you asked a question about applications on people's behalves. Yes, absolutely. Someone else can fill the form in for you if that's helpful to you. We have special arrangements in our application centres overseas for people to be accompanied if they're unable to negotiate the process themselves. So yeah, those things do exist, and of course someone can support and assist you in making that application, whether that's a family member or an agent or a lawyer.
All right, thank you very much.
I would say, I mean, the helpline details are in the slideshow. So if you want to talk to someone in a bit more detail and explain the circumstances with them, then that's probably the best thing to do, is to call the helpline and talk through with them what you're specifically talking about, and they can explain to you what may be possible.
All right, okay. Thank you very much then. That answers my question. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Pastor Kevin. Thank you very much. Let me quickly read from the chat from Reverend Dr. Paul Hamilton. It says, the steady and skillful management of the Windrush compensation outreach, especially to Africans and the Caribbeans, is laudable. Thank you, Team Home Office, and our Windrush Ambassador, Paul Sewell. I think Tom will take that back to the team, and that's a very good one. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Paul Hamilton. He is an opinion leader amongst the Black Asian minority ethnic group. And there's another one, though it's private, but I just want to assure, I'll clear that with Tom, because the person asking the question is Mr. Theo. I call him Brother Theo. He's an opinion leader amongst the Ghanaian community. He's a community leader within the Ghanaian community in United Kingdom, and a very responsible great man amongst the Ghanaians. Even though my MP is a Ghanaian too, I'm very proud of her, and for the support that she gave me on this project. I'll clear that with Tom, because he's asking if I can share the presentation after today. I'll clear that.
Sure. You're very welcome to share the presentation with anyone that would find it useful.
And I'll share it with
that's one of the. Yeah. Okay.
I'll share it with everybody online. And can I call another opinion leader in the community? He is the principal general practitioner and a high chief in the community, and the deputy president of the Yoruba Council of Elders, Pastor Dr. David Sawyer. Can you please unmute?
All right, thank you very much, Paul. I actually wanted to commend the Home Office, and I'm quite glad that Dr. Hamid did that. It's quite commendable, the steps that's been taken by the UK government in writing what obviously would have been considered a wrong situation for people. Very kind. We wanted to take it back to them. I also want to comment and then raise a question to Tom. Please, you cannot overemphasize the reassurance you are giving to our people regarding the fact that the details will not be passed further. In my opinion, there will be a lot more people who are still very skeptical about giving out their details. I know you've reassured us, but you know that the government can get anything at any time, whenever. So they need to be reassured that right now it might be okay. Will it be okay in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, that their details are safe? That's one thing. The only other thing, the question I want to ask is regarding the preliminary payment which can be given to people. If per chance or for whatever reason there's no progress in the application, would they have to refund? Thank you, Tom.
So on the second, once we've made a decision to give someone a preliminary payment, we wouldn't take it back. That the preliminary payment, we have to see some evidence that someone suffered, and we then, once we've accepted that and provided that preliminary payment, we wouldn't change our minds in effect. And even I think if we thought for whatever reason we could or we wanted to, we wouldn't legally be allowed to. So no, once we've made that initial assessment or made that assessment and made that preliminary payment, it can't be taken away. So that's the first point. I do appreciate what you're saying about kind of what can we say about where we are in the future and what will happen next. I would just reiterate that the commitments that we've made around information sharing are not necessarily being made just by me as an official in the Home Office. They've been made repeatedly by government ministers, in Parliament and elsewhere, which is almost the equivalent of them being in law in effect. And I would also say that for people of this group and this age, our view as a government is that we want to support them to prove their status. We're not interested in taking action against this group of people other than to do, people within this group other than to support them and provide them with support and compensation where necessary. So, I do absolutely understand people's concerns, and I think, given the history of some of the stories we've heard tonight, it's entirely understandable. But as I say, at the moment, it's practically difficult for that to happen from the compensation scheme. It would be impossible for anyone else to see our systems. And as I say, the thing that I think should give people most reassurance is that, this has been said in Parliament in front of select committees by government ministers, and I can't foresee of a scenario where, given quite rightly the level of public outrage at the original Windrush scandal, that any minister would choose to do anything different in the future.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm sure we just have about 10 minutes now more. But let me quickly say this before I call the next person that wants to ask a question. From another opinion leader and a community leader, that's the visionary of Alberta Prime Ministries worldwide, Reverend Prophetess Deborah Okikijesu. She said, same question she was about to ask, and thanks to Pastor Kemi Akambi for asking that question. Thank you for that. I'm sure people still want to ask questions. Very, very quickly, before I call Phil, can I ask Janet Soil to please unmute and ask questions?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for this information forum. My question is it possible for anyone who had suffered deportation from this country before the year 1988 and has passed away, is it possible for the family to apply on behalf of the deceased?
So yes is the answer to that. So we have a separate separate type of case or type of claim, which is called an estates claim. So if you are hold on, sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry. So yes is the answer to that. If you are the family member of someone who suffered and has sadly died, you can make what we call a deceased estates claim. So yes, we will again support you making that evidence, and in effect, the person who made the claim, who is the kind of legal next of kin, will receive the same compensation that person would have received if they were alive.
All right, thank you very much. Quickly, before I call Phil, there is a message here. It says, please if any application is filled on behalf of somebody that now resides in Nigeria, how will there be continuity in the follow-up if they are 17 or have to sign certain sections?
So we would need, I think, the person who resided overseas to sign and provide some evidence of their identity, even if someone in the UK was supporting them. So I think under those circumstances, someone would need to, they would need to get those documents put on an email. So sign a document and put it on a PDF and or, if possible, scan in any identity documents. You'll appreciate that. Well, absolutely happy for people to support someone else in making an application. We need to be able to evidence that we need some evidence of identity of the person who the application is being made for. So I think in those circumstances, we would want to see some electronic copies of documents and or, something signed and sent electronically. But again, for these specific circumstances, just speaking probably to the helpline is the right thing to do, and they will be able to. If you say, I have a family member and I need to do this or need to do that, they can provide you with some specific advice about that and how to do it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. I think that answers Princess Adenoga JP's question. We will soon be rounding up, but I need to call on Brother Theo, who is a community leader, the foremost community leader in the Ghanaian community. So please unmute and ask his question. And you can even avail us your efforts in getting the Ghanaian community on board the program. Thank you, Brother Phil.
So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Tom, for a brilliant presentation. As Paul said, one of the Ghanaian leads in the UK, and I live mostly in the Southwest. Some of the efforts I've been making is not just to Ghanaians, but looking at other African nationalities like Zimbabweans, Zambians, and Kenyans, because they are not aware of the scheme. So I'm trying to get them on board. In the case of Ghana, what I've done is spoken to a few Ghanaians, both here and back in Ghana. And like Paul is done, we are placing an advert in the local newspaper, a couple of local newspapers in Ghana, to get people who are currently residents in Ghana or who have relatives who may have passed on to get in touch. Because I know there's a huge community back in Ghana who were here before 1978, who were full residents. Some of them from our students stayed till 83 and then all went back. So I'm doing all that I can to get them all on board. I'm hoping that before end of March, I'll get at least 20, 30 people on board and apply. Most of them, I've asked them to also try and get hold of their national insurance number, if they could remember it. Not forgetting some of these guys are in the 80s or late 70s, so trying to get them to go dig out their insurance number is difficult. But I've also said, if you can remember where you worked and where you lived, that should suffice. So I don't know if that will suffice, especially where they lived and where they worked, if that will suffice, or they need the insurance number for. Sorry, Tom.
So, I mean, again, without going into detail, what we would do is we would try to help people to get information if they didn't have it handy. So, I totally appreciate, because I wouldn't have documents relating to things that happened 15 or 20 years ago. And, if you don't know your national insurance number, or you don't have those details or any paper documentation to support it, we will, with your permission, we'll talk to DWP and HMRC to see if we can access your tax records and your benefits records in order to evidence your story. It's quite obvious, for example, if someone's been working for 15, 20 years and then suddenly their tax records say they're not working for 2 years, that's very supportive of the the account that they might have given us about their history. And similarly, we can see where people have been refused benefits, refused housing, those kind of things wrongly from looking at government records in other departments. So we do seek to go out and evidence them. And another example of that is we very regularly will go to former employers to seek to their HR departments to try and get evidence, because what has often happened to people is that they have been told that the reason that they have lost their job is because of their immigration status, but they weren't, that wasn't given to them in writing. A lot of organisations will then have just provided them with just a letter that just said you've lost your job. So we will go and talk to organisations and seek information from their HR departments. We can also see where organisations have made checks with us on someone's immigration status, and sometimes that can prove and evidence people's accounts. So we will try a number of different avenues to help people to evidence their applications.
Thank you very much. As I begin to coast home, let me quickly say this before we round off. There is a private message sent to me. A church leader is asking, as a church, can we apply for the community funding so that we can advertise in Nigeria and here? I hope Tom can answer that.
So yes, I think as a church or a community group that you could. As I say, you probably don't have much time for the first window, but the second window, you certainly can. I think if that presentation shared, there's some more details about how to get involved in that. Yeah, there's a web link. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. What we want to do with the community fund is get into the broadest range of communities, places, and people as possible. The Home Office is never going to be able to persuade a lot of people to consider the scheme in the way that people on this call and groups on this call can. So we'd very much encourage people to look at that and to access that information, and if they think it's appropriate to them, to make a bid.
All right. Thank you very much. There is another opinion leader. Two of them. I'll quickly read this as we have 8 more minutes. Most of them have programs that are community-based, grassroots-based, and I'm sure they could use their platform to announce now that I have, they are now equipped with more information directly from the Home Office as represented by the head of the Windrush scheme. From God's Daughter, she has a very wonderful program, just like Bertel and all others. Thank you, Tom, for sharing this information. Great appreciation to Pastor Paul Swell for championing this cause. I will surely be following up to see how can this be passed on to those who might benefit from this. She's a God's Daughter. She's a lawyer, just like myself, and I'm sure she has a lot to offer. Thank you very much for your response to my question. That's Princess Adenuga. I'm sure a lot of people are happy tonight. Her Royal Majesty, Her Royal Highness, Lua says, many thanks to Tom for the very informative session. Massive appreciation to Pastor Paul Soil for arranging this event. God bless everyone. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all. Please, for this presentation, you can please email me on secretary@caccuk.org. and I will forward the presentation. Sadmi Akin said, thank you very much for all the effort in presenting this loaded information. Thank you very much for all the effort in presenting this. All right. Thank you very, very much. As we have 6 more minutes, let me seize this opportunity to thank immensely. One thing that did not happen to me tonight, which I was very, very cautious of, was that as a health and safety practitioner and a trainer, I remember there was a day when I was delivering training, and unfortunately, I said, praise the Lord. You know, when you talk after a long time, you say, praise the Lord. And someone said, Paul, what are you saying? I said, sorry, you didn't hear that. I was just speaking in French. So I made sure that I didn't say that. But I have to thank God for all that made it possible. And I have to thank immensely Tom for having the time outside the normal office hours to sit down and do this wonderful presentation and answer questions. And I'm sure it's beyond the Windrush. You have given the community assurance that the Home Office is not the whole hostile Home Office, which is unapproachable. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tom. Windrush Compensation Scheme at homeoffice.gov.uk, and you can call on 0800-678-1925, 0800, and if you're calling from outside, +44 800-678-1925. I'll share all that with everyone that is online. And thank you very much, Thom. And I have to thank Rosetta too. She's been very, very wonderful, very, very supportive. She's a wonderful human being. Thank you very much, Rosetta. I appreciate you. And your able assistant, Catherine, she supported. I could see her online. Thank you. She sent me personal information. Thank you very much. And everyone working with Tom and Rosetta. I cannot but thank my leaders, Reverend Emmanuel Mobino Friday Oshofa, the head of Celestial Church of Christ Worldwide, who personally called and gave his support to the community, which I mean, one of the communities I represent, to ensure that they give support to this program. I thank you very much, and that's the reason why you have a lot of head of provinces, head of districts, and the diocese office here. I have to thank also His Eminence, Reverend Father Oluwole Aremu Abiola, OBE, the life president of the Council of African Caribbean Churches, for his support, and the moderator of the Council of African Caribbean Churches, Her Eminence Archbishop Dr. Prophetess Fidelia Oyuku Opukiri. They both worked in the community, and we're just building on what they've achieved. And thank you all, and the elders of the council. Also, various ministries that are represented there, opinion leaders in the community. If I keep mentioning names, we'll run over the time. But I just have to thank everyone. I thank the camera crew here. I thank the Children's Seraphim community. Lots and lots of opinion leaders, business leaders. Thank Brother Theo and the Ghanaian community. They're doing wonderfully well. Thank you very much. Please avail yourself the opportunity of taking advantage of this community, Windrush Community Fund, so that you can spread the information. Tom, there are some people who are not in the radar of the Home Office. You know that. We've said it several times, who, because of our position in the community, who relate to us. Then, and some other ministers of God that are here. And so this will filter to them, and we expect more people coming forward for the compensation. Lastly, there was a man that went to the Nigerian to apply for visit in United Kingdom, and went to the Nigerian High Commission. He was invited, and they checked his record, and they found out that he could benefit from the Windrush compensation scheme. Lo and behold, this old man and the wife were given their red passport right there within 2 hours in Nigerian High Commission in Nigeria. I mean British High Commission in Nigeria. So we are seeing a new face of our Home Office, and I hope definitely we'll all cooperate with the Home Office. And, if you know anyone that has suffered from the Windrush scandal, please feel free. It's better to ask and get clarification than sitting on the fence. And I can assure you just like Tom said, in the parliament, the ministers have given the assurance that no one, and I said, I know people who came to me even with their letters, and no immigration enforcement had knocked on their doors. And we keep saying that. And we still hope to work with the Home Office even beyond today. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your cooperation. I have a colleague here, Barry Long, says Paul and Tom. Thank you, Barry. Thank you for supporting. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all. And Reverend Opedare, sincere regards. Thank you very much. Reverend Richard Opedare, thank you very much. Please pass this information to your congregation, the members of the community, and in all the forums that you represent. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, and God bless. Once again, my name is Shepherd Paul Tunde Shole. Thank you, everyone, and God bless you all. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.